All right, cool. It's probably long enough to wait, so I think it's just going to be us today. So hopefully this will be better with a smaller group. I might just dim these lights. So we can watch a few of these videos. So what I want to go through today is basically the first part of. It's weird. The first part of go-to-market strategy and what go-to-market means. So a lot of the stuff that we've been going through up to date, so up until now, has been, pardon me, has been strategy. So figuring out your business model canvas, what's the strategy behind your idea, or coming up with your idea, you know, what's the general strategy behind it. But for the next 2 weeks, we'll just talk about, all right, the actual execution behind your strategy, day-to-day work that you would do in your startup to bring your idea to life. So I want to do it slightly differently to the way that I've done it before. So there's a few things to go through in terms of content, just to step through. We can talk about how they relate to your individual ideas. And then I want to go through an exercise or a workshop structure around putting some of this in place specifically for your startup ideas. Primarily the the content strategy is probably the largest thing. Then next week, what we'll go through, so a lot of the go-to-market for this is actually content related, or taking your business proposition to market. The next week will be focused on revenue, the revenue side of the equation. So advertising, subscription, other revenue models, primarily with media startups in mind. Cool. Does that make sense? Before I launch in, do you have any questions? Any stuff you want to discuss about last week or anything like that?
Is the content we're creating or we're going through now, is that based on our final assignment as well? Is that what we're going to incorporate? So prior to this week, everything that we've been talking about obviously relates to our first assignment?
To an extent. So just take this as basically theory. This stuff. This isn't supposed to be, I expect you to have all of this down pat for your MVP, which is due at the end of this week. That would be unreasonable. But it's more just general concepts in terms of content strategy. How much of it is executed as part of your MVP? Yeah. Obviously, I'm just introducing this now, so it's not an expectation to be in there. But for the next one, yeah, it's an expectation that there would be some form of content strategy that you would be implemented into the next assignment, which is the big one. Yeah. If content is part of your business model, so of which it's varying degrees for a lot of the guys within the class. Like some of them it's all content, some of them it's not. So cool. So the basic summary of what go-to-market means is go-to-market means growth. So startups are about growth. If you're not growing, you're basically dead. I might play a little bit of this video back around what it actually means, so execution, what it actually means, from Sam Altman at Y Combinator is probably the best kind of assessment. Before I go into that, I might actually just go through this ideas economy. So I mentioned this earlier in the semester, but it's good to refresh on it. So basically, any startup can be boiled down to how well you execute. Ideas, everybody's got ideas, right? And there's so many more people who have ideas as opposed to the people who are actually willing to actually work on them. So the key distinction between your success or your failure is basically your capacity and willingness and determination behind your execution, as outlined by this execution multiplier. So ideas are generally worth not very much. Awful ideas are worth a negative. Into the best idea you've ever heard is probably worth $20 if you would say, I'm going to buy that idea off you. But a great idea that's really well executed is worth a hell of a lot. An actual weak idea with really good execution is still worth quite a lot. Hence why an idea like Airbnb, it was a great idea, but the key distinction with those guys is they were really good executors. They were just determined and ruthless, and they would not give up. Hence why they're it's like a multi-billion-dollar company even though it's such a esoteric idea. So a really great idea executed really poorly will basically result in a poor outcome. What it actually means, what great execution means, we can just listen to a little bit of this.
So now we're going to talk about execution. Execution for most founders is not the most fun part of starting a company, but it is often the most critical. Most people that start a company think that they are signing up to have this brilliant idea, and then they're just going to be on magazine covers and go to parties. But really, what it's about more than anything else, what being a founder means is signing up for this years-long grind on execution, and you can't outsource this. The way to have a company that executes well is to execute well yourself. Everything in a startup gets modeled after the founders. Whatever the founders do becomes the culture. So if you want a culture where people work hard and pay attention to detail and focus on the customer and are frugal, you have to do it yourself. There's no other way. You cannot hire a COO and have them, do this while you go off to conferences. The company just needs to see you as this maniacal execution machine. As I said in the first lecture, there's 100 times at least more people with great ideas than people that are willing to put in the effort to execute them well. Ideas by themselves are not worth anything. Only executing well is what adds value, or what creates value. A big part of execution is just putting in the effort, but there's a lot you can learn about how to be good at it. And so we're going to have, I think, 3 classes that just talk about this. So the CEO, people have asked me a bunch of times, the jobs of a startup CEO. And there are probably more than 5, but here are 5 that come up a lot in the early days. The first 4, I think everyone thinks of as CEO jobs. Set the vision, raise money, evangelize the company to people you're trying to recruit, existing employees, partners, press, customers, everybody. Hire and manage the team. But the 5th one is that setting the execution bar. And this is not something that most founders get excited about or think about themselves doing, but I think is actually one of the critical CEO roles, and no one but the CEO can do this. Execution gets divided into two key questions. 1, can you figure out what to do? And 2 is, can you get it done? So I want to talk about 2 parts of getting it done, assuming that you've already figured out what to do. And those are focus and intensity. So focus is critical. One of my favorite questions to ask founders is what they're spending their time and their money on. This reveals almost everything about what founders think is important. One of the hardest parts about being a founder is that there are 100 important things competing for your attention every day. And you have to identify the right 2 or 3, work on those, and then ignore or delegate or defer the rest. And a lot of these things that founders think are really important, interviewing a lot of different law firms, going to conferences, recruiting advisors, whatever, they just don't matter, right? And what really does matter varies with time, but it's an important piece of meta advice. You need to figure out what the 2 or 3 most important things are, and then just do those. And you can only have 2 or 3 things every day, because everything else will just come at you, fires of the day. And if you don't get really good at setting what these two or 3 priorities are every day, you'll never be great at actually getting stuff done. This is really hard for founders, right? Founders are people that get excited by starting new things. Unfortunately, the trick to great execution is to say no a lot. You're saying no 97 times out of 100. And most founders find that they have to make a very conscious effort to do this. Most startups are not nearly focused enough. They work really hard, maybe, but they don't work hard on the right things, and you'll still fail. One of the great and terrible things about starting a startup is that you get no credit for trying. You only get points when you make something that the market wants. So if you work really hard on the wrong things, no one will care. So then there's this question of how do you figure out what to focus on each day. And this is where it's really important to have goals. Most good founders that I know at any given time have a small number of overarching goals for the company. Everybody in the company knows. Could be things like ship a product by this date, maintain this growth rate, get this certain engagement rate, hire for these key roles, get this deal done. But anybody could tell you in the company every week what are our key goals, and then everybody executes based off of that. The founder really does set the focus. Whatever the founder cares about, whatever the founders think are the key goals, That's going to be what the whole company focuses on. And the best founders repeat these goals over and over, far more often than they think they should need to. They put them up on the walls, they talk about them in one-on-ones, all hands meeting every week. But it keeps the company focused. One of the keys to focus, and why I said I think co-founders in different places struggle, is that you can't be focused without really great communication. Even if you only have, say, 4 or 5 people in a company, a small communication breakdown is enough for everybody to be working on slightly different things. And then you lose focus and the company just scrambles. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, but growth and momentum are...
I might stop it there. You can watch the rest in your own time if you like. And he goes on to talk about individual roles and a range of different things around focus and execution, what you should look for and how you should behave when you're working. But essentially for media startups, if you're wondering, like if you're not sure about what to focus on, generally you're doing one of two things. You're building an audience and you're monetizing the audience. So you should, depending on what phase you're at, you should be spending your time, generally all of your time, on one of those things. So if you haven't got an audience, build an audience. Once you've got an audience, try and sell the audience to someone. That's a simplification because other business models, your business model might be more complicated or it might be different. Obviously, your business model canvas will give you that insight. That should generally be your focus though. So to build an audience, you need to understand what your content strategy is. I'll actually expand on this in the last or half of this session tonight, but your content strategy, what it looks like in execution, is basically you have the themes of content you're creating, you've got the media or the channel where you're executing it, and the cadence that you're producing that content on. That's as simple and boiled down as your content strategy can get. I'm creating this type of content in this medium and I'm pushing it out at this frequency on those different channels. That then goes into your revenue strategy. So how are you going to monetize that content as it comes out, as it creates an audience? That's all you're doing when you're setting a content strategy. It's not rocket science. People bang on about content strategy as if it's really, really complicated. It's not complicated. Although you can try and make it look complicated to impress investors, which is what we tried to do here. So this was the Fans Unite content strategy. This is what we were talking about when we were going out to investors. Fans Unite being a sports media startup that I was involved in. We basically said, look, we're trying to build content for digital media and we're going to produce content across a range of different themes and types on this kind of cadence. We had basic content we were creating, which was basically pictures, words, blog posts, etc. Its role in our audience development strategy was basically developing a community. We then had specific types of content that we were designing to be shareable or trying to make as shareable as possible. The idea behind that was we were getting organic distribution. So it was an organic engine of growth, viral engine of growth, sorry, to use the lean startup parlance. Its role was user acquisition and we had metrics specifically tied to that. We had rich media content from our partners and then some of the content that we produced to try and engage users, and when they got to our website, keep them on there for longer. And then our metric against that was dwell time. And then at the top, which we didn't quite get to, but it was part of the strategy, over time, is that we wanted to create data-driven content that was really rich and interactive and engaging. So people could basically come and, mash up data for their favorite sports teams and a bunch of other stuff. And that was, the end point. We were like, all right, if we can get there, then that'd be great. And that's the end part of our content strategy in terms of the type of content we wanted to create. All of our themes were preset because we were creating content about sport. Those sports were set for us because there's only a certain range of sports that you want to cover if you're covering football in Australia. And that's the kind of content that we set. That's a really basic content strategy. As I said, I'll loop back onto content strategy after this. After that, you need to think about, all right, distribution tactics and distribution strategy for your content. So you've got your content strategy. This is what I'm producing. This is its form. This is the frequency I'm producing that content. How am I going to get it to my customer segments, which in your business model canvas is your channels for this specific customer segment. Now, I'll talk specifically about earn and paid strategies. For Fans Unite, we basically took a paid distribution strategy, and I'll pull up a piece of analysis we did on that in a second. And then there's viral or organic distribution, or earned distribution, which is where you try and create content that, by nature of its shareability or by nature of its interest, gives you organic reach without you having to pay for it. If you're interested in viral growth, anything to do with getting people to engage, follow, generally be interested in what you do, this guy is basically wrote the book on it. His name's Andrew Chen. He's a blogger. For a long time, he was a blogger. He was a VC before that, just about growth. And he, a couple of years ago, was then headhunted by Uber, and now he's Uber's head of growth. So he basically runs the whole growth vehicle for Uber. Seriously credentialed guy. So this video is an interview with AppNexus. AppNexus are a media advertising platform. So the conversation they're having is specifically around how do I distribute or how do I grow in the context of media as an industry. So it uses a couple of examples, so it's really interesting for us. So I'll just pull that up. Again, it's one of those videos, I won't play all of it.
Supposedly the first banner ad on hotwire.com was like a 70% click-through rate thing because nobody had ever seen it before. Nobody knew what it was at all, right? And so everyone clicked on it, and then now what is it? It's like 0.0 something percent is probably the average, 0.02% or whatever it is, right? And so you see this decay over and over again. Email and banner ads might be, sort of some of the oldest examples. Some of the newest examples might be something like, what's happening, folks that are using like Instagram or YouTube as marketing, right? But I think we're also in a really, we were just talking about this backstage, we're also in a really unique industry where it feels like these new channels are getting created like faster and faster and faster. Like, we probably had like 4, TV channels for like decades. I don't know what the actual number is. I'm sure it's like for a really long time. Yeah, 3, exactly.
Until Fox came along.
And then now we're talking about like, every year there's like, oh, we got to try Snapchat, we got to try Instagram. We were just talking about WeChat. There's so many new channels, it's so fragmented. But the startups and the companies that, figure out how to uniquely get their products to fit into these channels, get this huge advantage. One of my friends runs growth over at Ipsy, and their amazing insight is I don't know if you guys might have heard of this company, but basically they figured out that a lot of YouTube videos were makeup tutorials. And so they partnered with Michelle Phan, who has like, I think hundreds of millions of YouTube views, right? Like of her literally just putting on makeup. And she was doing it from her house for like many, many years, has built an amazing audience. And they built a company that just, partners with YouTube celebrities that do these makeup tutorials and then sells them sort of like a Birchbox, like subscription. And it's just like a perfect fit. People talk about, product market fit. This is like product channel fit or something. It's like, it's so perfect. And they've been able to build like, super fast, and, it's over 100 million in revenue in just a couple of years, subscription revenue because they had this type of an insight. And so I think that's always like an interesting thing is like, how quickly can you kind of identify these things and like put the right product out in the market?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that causes the most fear when I talk to traditional publishers. You're speaking to people who have been in the same basic business for 100 years, a newspaper company. And one of our clients in Europe is Schibsted, and they were very smart or lucky, depending on who you ask, 15 years ago to start getting into the online classified business. And so there's a very obvious alignment between newspapers and classifieds, and they built an incredible online franchise around this idea of being news and classifieds together, which is interesting because if you look at these sort of product market or product channel fit moments, it's not enough to find that fit. You have to actually execute. I mean, there's a lot of newspapers who figured that out 15 years ago. But there's only one that was able to make that set of investments. So those growth hacker moments, what really launches businesses, the question is, I think, is it inspiration? Is it perspiration? Are these genius entrepreneurs like Travis or any of these guys, Brian, like are these guys the people who really figured it out, or is there some kind of process that they can follow to create this kind of liftoff?
Yeah. So I think so I'm from Seattle originally and grew up there and sort of like was watching the tech industry from Seattle. And especially in the consumer world, it just felt like, from the outside, it felt like it was so random, right? And it was sort of like, okay, this took off, but that didn't take off, but they're kind of like about the same, like what's really going on. And I think one of the most interesting things, coming to, when I moved to the Bay Area a decade ago, was I got to know a bunch of the PayPal alumni, right? And if you remember, PayPal sort of became large and became dominant sort of in the post.com like bubble bursting era, right? They came in at a time where there was like, where all the spend on, Super Bowl commercials or whatever was sort of over. And, you had a bunch of really quantitative folks that, they created a lot of the early ideas around like, how do you measure, sort of virality as these PayPal badges are being spread on eBay listings. And like when eBay customers like click on, we accept PayPal, how do you get them to then publish these PayPal badges onto their listings? And how do you build these like viral, and so what was really interesting is they really built a lot of expertise and kind of this mindset. And I think they were really the early pioneers in this whole like field of growth because, some of the first, let's say 100 PayPal folks went on to start, YouTube and Yelp and LinkedIn and played, instrumental roles in, making Facebook as big as it is, and so on and so forth, because of the fact that they had this like really quantitative mindset, So I think that's been one really interesting thing is like there definitely is, when you look at these growth teams, there's only, maybe 24 growth teams in the Bay Area. There is definitely so much expertise around like, thinking about activation and sign up and, and sort of like bringing all these modern techniques in. But then also, I think searching for, hey, what's the like next new channel that we might be able to like, build upon. So I think for a lot of the, the folks that are from maybe more traditional, mindsets, I think that's always an interesting thing is like, how do you continue to experiment and learn about new channels, and how do you figure out, when you look at like, in your part of the world in New York, BuzzFeed versus folks that are like traditional, like newspapers, they're building the same thing. It's just content, right? But why is it that like, BuzzFeed has been able to find their super interesting channels, Facebook and Twitter and so on, but these other, properties maybe haven't, right? And I think that that's, a lot of that is, fundamentally that when you get started for the first time as a startup, you exist in a completely new world where you can like go after maybe a channel that like only blipped into existence in the last, year, and you can focus your entire effort on like YouTube or Snapchat or something, and you can be like the pure play. And then if it works out, then you can like always go elsewhere. And I think, that's one of the best parts about being in the Bay Area, I think, is, being able to watch kind of like end to end a lot of these new startups and concepts really like emerge and then become successful. Although of course like 99.9% of them fail.
Details.
Details, yeah.
But
Cool. So I quite like that mentality in the context of what we're trying to do. Find your channel, find your distribution, and just optimize for that. And once you find it, they always say just double down on doing that more. So I used the example last week, but I'll talk about it again, of crikey.com.au. They found their channel, or they nailed their channel, which was one email distribution, and they built a whole business around that. All these other channels emerged. They were like, that's just our thing. That's the thing that we do. We optimize our growth around that. And that was all. So you don't necessarily need to have like 100 channels that you work with. Vox.com did a similar thing, but with their, in the email space, with their evening kind of distribution. But their model for growth was probably more balanced. I think Vox Media, Firefox, yeah. Vox Media haven't really said, oh, we've got like, a specific growth distribution tactic around those things. We actually had, as I mentioned, our paid distribution channel or mechanism. Basically, we said we're going to optimize to acquire users via paid means. There we go. Rather than a viral growth, we said we're going to try and basically acquire users and put investment behind individual pieces of content to try and convert users back to being a loyal audience over time. And this is one of the tests we did on a specific blog called about the Collingwood Football Club, hence it's what's called the No Grey Area Club content test. So it's pretty old now. So these amounts of money we'd probably have to spend would be a bit higher now. So basically, cost per click and then the weight behind each one and how much we had to invest to get people to convert. So obviously, the lower, the better. And then we could optimize the campaign towards those individual pieces of content that were converting audience back to our individual mastheads more. So you don't... Some media companies do this more than others, this paid model of growth. It's obviously pretty... You can only really do this if you've got something else you're trying to monetize on them. So traditional advertising models can't really support this, whereas if you've got other mechanisms of making money, you can. So traditional media companies where they might be all advertising based that might not have, say, subscription or sponsorship revenue opportunities probably don't have that. Like, this wouldn't be really viable for them, but for us, it was viable at the time, particularly because we were in a growth phase. And we specifically did it on Facebook only. So we only did this on Facebook. We didn't do it on any other channel. We basically didn't try and acquire users from any other channel. Cool. So the next thing I'll talk you through is SEO. So SEO is a key pillar for most types of content. So depending on your distribution strategy, so for some types of content is not as important. So the guy mentioned BuzzFeed, their acquisition via search is actually pretty low when you look at their total volume of traffic. There's a platform called SimilarWeb, which you can actually use to figure out, all right, what's the distribution, what's the channel strategy for some of my competitors. So this is actually quite interesting. You can see for a specific website. So if we try something like the New York Times, so they get 382 million visits a month, according to this, and there's a rough breakdown by country. But what is interesting is this source view just here, pardon me, and that'll give you a sense of, all right, what are their channels, what is their distribution strategy. So for these guys, social is 15%, direct is really high because they have a really well-known brand. So direct being someone typing in NewYorkTimes.com in the browser. And then search is the next biggest channel, so 27%. So these guys will rely on SEO optimization as a distribution strategy quite heavily relative to other platforms. Referrals can be a similar thing, like link building, which I will talk about in a moment. Do you guys want me to put in anything else? What are some news sites you're interested in?
I have one.
Yeah. It has to be relatively big for this thing to work in the free plan. Also, just on the numbers here, like what's more interesting is this share as opposed to the total volume of traffic, because it's a bit like it's an estimate of this product.
How big?
A couple of million a month would probably be the threshold.
I think it's that big. Well, I don't know. There's one that's called foodie.com.au. Foodie without the E at the end.
Foodie.com.au.
Yes.
Okay, 48,000 a month. Let's see if it gives us, it might not give us that. Oh no, it's had a crack at it. Okay. Referrals. So non-social link building and sharing. So that referral traffic can be, you create a network of guest blogs that link back to your individual content. It can be, sometimes it can be platforms that are still sort of like social media, but they aren't classified as social platforms. Sometimes Reddit can go in there just because it's like a little bit different. But generally that means people are linking to that from other blogs. Okay. But with that amount of traffic for this kind of product, I'd question how accurate that is. Because the reason why I can say that is because when I was running Fans Unite, I used to put Fans Unite in here and I could actually see the real numbers. And when it was low, like we got up to about 300,000 monthly uniques, it started getting a bit closer to being more like reality. When it was that size, it was really, it was off. So let's put in BuzzFeed. It gives you the mobile apps as well. Wow, I didn't realize it was that high. Quite global audience too. Yeah, there we go. So that's the distribution. Starting to get a fair bit of direct, which is cool. Search, actually, that's quite high. That's a lot higher than I expected. And some of the referrals. I have Feedly, so aggregators, other media companies, Flipboard, yeah. Y Combinator, the newsfeed, Hacker News. Cool. And of those, what is that search, primarily organic, of their primary media brand name. So you're not going to get content in there. It's really a weird thing. And it's primarily Facebook. Anyone else have one? You want to try? Cool. So for SEO, if you want to learn about SEO, SEO and SEM, so search engine marketing as well as search engine optimization, there's a great sort of webmaster's tool here. Will give you an understanding of, right, what are the things that I should be doing to try and improve. If you want to get like a pretty good, what I think is probably a pretty good book on this guy, I think updates this every year, but I'm not sure at the moment whether it's totally up to date because the algorithms are constantly changing. This is a super cheap book. It's definitely not academic at all, but it's basically just like, what are the things that I should be doing to improve SEO like right now, and it'll just give you a list of stuff. It's super easy to read, it's really easy to get into, and it's one of the best that I think is out there. So go and read this SEO Fitness Workbook. I'll show you what recommendations, and I'll give you an understanding of, like, when you are a publisher and you say, right, what do I want to do to improve my SEO? If you go to someone and actually say, all right, you know, we paid these guys a fair amount of money and they came back and told us, all right, this is what you need to do. And they gave us an SEO strategy as a publisher. So this is generally what it looks like. Essentially, they'll give you a lay of the land and tell you, all right, what are your primary competitors? If you view this, and I might put this on Slack, if you view this as like a template to say, all right, if you were going to go through and figure out if SEO is one of your key distribution strategies, what would you do? If you were to build up a strategy, you could basically just replicate this. Go through and look at where your competitors are, as these guys did for us. Analyze how they actually create that. So you can use tools like Moz or SEMrush or things like that to get an understanding of how they optimize for inbound links, so how they create authority behind the domains. And then there are tools out there, they give you like domain authority. So that was our domain authority relative to some of these things. Some of our competitors. Essentially, domain authority is, if you're unaware, the number of links. Google basically prioritizes your website based on the number of links that link back to your website. Links are the number one. They're like the currency of the internet at the moment. So the more people pointing back to your website, the higher Google ranks you. It's pretty basic. Most media companies, and I'd encourage you guys to do this as well, use a thing called no-follow links. So it's a really basic kind of technical thing you should look into. Basically, it means every time you link out from a news story, because you're linking out to stuff all the time to say, oh, this report on The Guardian or this report where here, if you put a little tag on it, you can do this with WordPress, you just check a button called no follow. Basically that tells Google, I'm linking this for my users. It doesn't necessarily mean I think this site is good. So you're not giving away domain authority. So I said before, like link building is basically a slightly underhanded technique of paying people to do that for you. So paying people who are not necessarily affiliated to you, but paying people to link back to your site, which is very expensive and it's not very effective. It's better to have really great content that people want to link back to you on. So for example, Vox.com has a content strategy that inherently drives people to link to them because they have explainers. So Vox.com is all about, we are the explainer of something difficult to understand in the news. So inherently that's sort of like the up-to-date, more authoritative version of Wikipedia. So people are more likely to link to them. So that's almost like an organic link building strategy built into their content. We had pretty terrible domain authority, as you can see. So they basically said, all right, what are the things that we can do to improve your domain authority? There's a tool, you can search for it on Google. It's like Google SEO performance tester or performance tool, SEO tool. You can basically just put your website in there and it will tell you all of these things. So you don't have to pay someone to do it. It'll just give you, all right, what are the things you need to do? Do you need to change the way the URLs are structured because certain URLs are treated better by Google than other URL structures? Do you have a thing called canonical tags? Yes or no? A bunch of other stuff. So how's your page speed? You can test your page speed using GTmetrix, which I showed you last week. Do you have a sitemap? Is all your metadata up to date? Etc, etc. And the more of this stuff that you get right, the better. With the exception, because this is a bit old, that Google Plus optimization, you can ignore that. That doesn't exist anymore because Google Plus is gone. But basically this is a big list and you just need to optimize your content and the way that your content is presented to search engine, for users who are trying to find your content via search, pardon me. I might share this on Slack rather than going through it, but you get the general idea. If search is an important distribution point for you guys. The last thing I want to talk about before we go into the workshop component is the funnel model. So you've got your distribution strategy around content, you've got your content strategy. The way to think about how those things work in tandem is actually via a funnel. So every single business can have a view of what it looks like for customers to go through a funnel related to the relationships that they want to build. So in your business model canvas, you've got your value proposition, your customer segments, your channels, and then the customer relationships. A funnel is just merely a way of visualizing the state that different customers are in and the kinds of relationships you want them to have. It's a very old marketing technique and it applies just as well to media companies as it does to any other company. I think it was some guy came up with it in late 1800s. It's that old. Sorry, 1800s, late in like 1895. Essentially, this video probably doesn't explain it as well as I'd want to, but you can watch it in your own time. He's a guy who just talks about how this applies for digital products. But essentially, that diagram is what it actually looks like. And you can map out a funnel and the goals or the state of relationship you want to have with customers as they move through those steps in the funnel. The idea being, at the top you have more people, and at the bottom you have less people. And as they move down through the funnel, they're going through steps of a relationship with your product, with your company, with your content, whatever it is. And at each step they get closer and closer to you. They have a stronger relationship and ultimately will have a purchase moment. you can apply this even in a media context, in a media business model. You can apply it to an audience as much as you can apply it to advertisers. What steps are in the funnel is up to you. Depends on your business model, depends on your kind of customers. Generally, there might be, say, for a digital business, there might be awareness, people who are aware of you, people who are actually a lead, so people who are have engaged with you in some way, people who might be trialing your product, and then people who have purchased your product. At the bottom, you might have your different products that people would be purchasing, and then there's the referral kind of evangelizing of your product, so people who share your content, all of that sort of stuff, if you're thinking about it from an audience perspective. I might actually show you.
What it says at the end?
I might show you this, actually, so we can get a sense of it. So this is a funnel that I built for a publication we were launching called Future Marketer. That's a little mock-up of the design. But essentially it was a way to build an audience around my software product. So it was a publication that we were launching in order to create an audience, and then we were going to sell products to that audience. But we wanted them to go through this kind of purchase funnel flow. So when people just landed on the publication, it was like futuremarketer.io was the URL. I think it's still there. The first time, if they'd never seen us before, I just wanted to make them aware of who we were and what we were doing as a publication. And so my content theme for that state was just content and publishing, the benefit of actually getting into it, because basically my product is trying to encourage people to be publishers and get into content. So I was like, well, what are the benefits? So that was the content theme, doing a job around that specific stage in the funnel. Next, I want people to be interested in trying to do it. So my content theme at that point in the funnel is the approach and strategy. So much like the conversation we're having today, what are the ways that you might think about building an audience? Why would you do it? How would you do it? The consideration stage is sort of an extension of that, execution and tactics on actually how you would do that. And as I got those customers or potential customers down to the evaluation stage, I wanted to start producing content that's specifically evaluation content around, all right, well, if I'm making a decision about being a publisher, what kind of technology, tools and platforms should I be evaluating in that instance? So that's where I can start producing content about the kinds of platforms that are out there and say, hey, Cognitives is one of those platforms. You could consider using it in comparison to these other competitors of mine. Then there's a buy moment. So at that point, we would basically hand over to our salespeople. And then after that, there's content around use cases and trying to convert people into advocates and different content. There's a really good guy called Tomas Tungas. He's a blogger who writes on this quite a lot. You can search for that content and he's got a lot of this sort of stuff. Essentially, when you build a funnel and when you visualize a funnel for your business, for your content startup, generally you'll find that people sit in these sort of in the stages at the top of the funnel up here. I might close that so I can use the mouse. The top of the funnel up here, so you might have 30% or maybe more. It's probably like 50% of your total audience will probably sit in this bracket. You might have a metric saying, all right, well, that's people who are new, my new audience. And you might be churning through a new audience every day. 50% of your entire audience might be people who've never seen your content before, right? The trigger between here and the next stage, so for you guys, it mightn't be as complicated. You might just have three. You might go from, aware, interested, and then evaluating. Potentially might be your phase, and then your buy moment, if you've got a subscription revenue model, might be signing up for a subscription. You might find that the trigger point between here and here is generally something specific. So what you want to do is basically try and figure out what that is and produce content to try and get more people from that light stage of relationship to a stronger stage of relationship. For example, if your metric that aligns with that is like people who are new versus people who are returning. So if you're going to try and convert people from being a new member of an audience to being a returning member of an audience, a really simple way to do that is to try and produce content that's in a series. It forces them to come back, and don't push out the multiples of that series to social, because it'll force them to come to your website to get the update or get the next stage in the series. It's pretty basic. There's going to be, obviously that's a really simplified example, there's going to be far more nuance than that, specific to your value proposition. But that's how you can think about, and the way that this tool, because funnels are just tools, think about how to use it in the context of your go-to-market strategy. At every point there'll be basically blockers, there'll be gains and pains, which we'll go through in a second based on the value proposition design canvas. Gains and pains that you can identify to try and basically produce content that specifically does that for you. Cool. In these following slides, you can see how I've done this and mapped out the funnel, what I call a funnel, which is still, this is still the same funnel for another business type, and how this is basically my lead channel. So all the different things that I was trying, I was producing content and then distributing that content out to try different things. These are all my different channels. So trying to get, display, YouTube, video networks, content networks, earned media, guest blogging, a range of different stuff just to try and build my audience. All of those were mechanisms to try and get people into the funnel. And then obviously social or owned channels, so social, and then Future Marketer as a publication. So what I might go through to try and bring that to life is this exercise. So I'll do this at the same time, so you guys can just do this specifically for your own individual startup, and I'll do it for one of mine as well. So ignore the time things, because this will just be for you guys to do individually. And I'll put, for those off-campus students, I'll put these slides up as part of, as like an addendum to the lectures. Your audiences generally should probably already be in your business model canvas. You kind of have an idea of who they are, right? If you're just a media company, like if that's what your startup is, then you'll already, you might have one, you might have one or two. But if you're going to do this exercise, generally you'd be thinking about creating content or a content stream just for that audience. So it's probably best to just choose one at the start. If I just ran this exercise with Monash University as a client, and they have a range of different audiences, so they have to think about it more holistically, whereas I guess you guys can be more focused on that, so it's a bit easier. But essentially, once you've done that, what I'll get you to do is, if you just think about your audience as almost like a persona. Who are they? So, are they? So, in the case of your food kind of startup idea, are they people who eat out at least twice a week, as like your qualifier, that are in a city, that have a certain age demographic? Maybe they've got a certain income demographic. Like, just try and, however you want to frame them up, just try and frame them up like that. And then basically use the value proposition canvas, which I'll put up on the screen now, to try and identify what pains, gains, and jobs to be done that they are trying to engage with your media company on the basis to try and solve some of those things. So in the case of your startup, again, to use it as an example, this is the canvas, so it's a bit hard to read, but the basic jobs to be done, like customer jobs, might be, I just want to find out where I should go and eat. Like, where's cool in Melbourne to go and eat? That would be a key job that, say, your startup, or say something like Broadsheet, which is I think I've used that example before, a digital kind of restaurant reviews website. They only do good reviews. So when I go to it, I'm like, all right, it's date night. This is just really basic, like what I need from them. I need to know where to go and eat that's good. That's really basic. So that's like a really like a customer job. A customer job is basically something that's dispassionate. It's not like emotional. It's really like raw. So for example, to take it out of media, beer brands, like a customer job with a beer. It's like, I want to drink, or like I need refreshment, or I'm trying to relax with my friends and I want to get a drink. The actual brand that I buy, so that's in the customer jobs, say the Gains, the brand that I buy, I want it to say something about me. I want to get like a personal kind of fulfillment or personal lift out of that brand. So for example, when I go to Broadsheet to take it back into media, I want to be able to say to my friends that I know where to go and have that place be good, because I want to have that kind of social status as part of that. And I know Broadsheet can give me that. And that's a customer gain. Or on the flip side, it potentially would be something that I'm resolving as a pain, like the anxiety of like, you know, I've been out, I have kids, I don't eat out very often. I don't know where to go. That's a sort of example of those different things. If you get it, and on the value proposition canvas, we're just concentrating on the right hand side here for your content strategy. All of these different things will give you a clue to what you should be developing as your customer gains and pains. The reason why this is a good exercise to go through is it will give you an understanding of what your content strategy should be. If your content can deliver on those things for your audience, it's got a much better chance of actually winning its way into their media repertoire. Because if you think about all of those different things, those pains and gains for your audience, they're getting that from somewhere now, right? Someone is delivering them that content, whatever it is. So that's the first exercise. I won't go through this I'll go through. Then what you should do is just diagram up the funnel, the ideal funnel for that audience, using that diagram that I was showing you before. It's a really basic one, but you can say, look, it might be, for this audience, I want them to come in and just be aware of my content. And what awareness means is they're a new user to my website, and the kind of jobs that I think that they're going to be trying to do are X, Y, Z. The kinds of things I want them to get from my content are X, Y, Z. The next phase is a trial phase or an engagement phase, and my key metric for that might be they've signed up to an email newsletter. That's really basic. So that's the next phase. And then the final phase might be purchase, and that's where I might want them to sign up for a subscription or come to a paid event, or, sorry, in the case of your startup, that might be sponsoring a cat or giving them a treat or something like that. So whatever the steps are that you think define stronger or weaker relationships, just map it out on a flow. And then the next thing to do is basically build a topic tree or a theme tree around that. So you can say, look, these are my pains and gains and jobs to be done for my customer. This is the funnel. The kinds of content we should produce for that audience at the top of the funnel is X. Themes might be in the context of what I'm going to do with this exercise. Is a job board for university students. At the top, I would produce content around how important it is to have experience before you leave university. That would be like a broad topic theme at the top. In the middle of the funnel, where they're trying to evaluating like what it's like to, or how the tools you need to be a freelancer might be in the middle, because they might be thinking about picking up a freelance job through my job board. And at the bottom one, it might be, all right, they're in that kind of, they're actually engaged. They need to know about invoicing or tax or that sort of stuff, which is actually, all right, they're in the mode of actually engaging with my product. Those are the things. So those are my topics. Next, once you've got those big topic themes and map them against your funnel, if you really want to go deep on it, which I would recommend as the next step, is basically you go into the Google Keyword Planner and you say, all right, well, what kind of search volume is behind all these core topics and keywords? So then you can say, right, well, I thought my key piece of content for that theme would be, freelancer tools. So what do freelancers use? But actually, it turns out it's, a slight derivation or slight change of the keyword is X has lots more volume. People are actually searching for that more than they are what I thought. And you can sort of update it to say, all right, my topic tree, based on keyword search volume, I thought it would be this, but actually it's this. And that should give you a pretty strong content strategy. Cool. So what I might do is I'll make this so you can actually see it. Looking for the full one with these suggestions so you guys can get, yeah, there we go. Just needs to be high enough res so you can see it. Sorry, excuse me. There we go. That's better. Cool. So I might use this whiteboard in mine. Essentially, it's like define your audience. Fill out the jobs to be done, pains, and gains. Acknowledging that a lot of those are going to be assumptions, right? Because you guys haven't actually launched these yet. So there's like a lot of these things. Then build your funnel. And then map your topics and content themes to that funnel and those pains and gains. So things that you know you can create to solve those problems. Cool.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know for my startup that where I want it to be in the future, but that's different